Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Power with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real patriots about what's going on across our great state. Today, I am thrilled to be joined by Jeremy Tate. Jeremy is the founder and CEO of Classical Learning Tests, and he is here to revolutionize the testing scheme that has forced far too many kids into radically woke classrooms and prevented them from getting a high-quality education. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Mandy, thanks for having me.
Well, you are here as a father of 6 that recognized a huge problem, not just in Texas, but all across our great country, where we can see there's a monopoly, effectively, in the testing that's going on. Talk to us about what you saw and what made you say we need some options and opportunities.
Yeah, Mandy, great to be here. I always say at the outset, you've got this great show, and your audience may be thinking, he's having a testing person on? Like, what could be more boring than standardized testing? But I think precisely because it can seem so sterile and boring to a lot of people, it kind of flies under the radar as this incredibly powerful lever that ends up shaping American education. I think everybody in education knows or agrees that for better or worse, teachers are going to teach towards the test. And if you have got a left-wing Marxist perspective being pushed on the assessments, that's going to follow through and be pushed in the classroom as well. And so we started CLT a little over 10 years ago, seeing the influence of the College Board and the ACT on schools and pushing them in an ideological direction that is anti-Western, anti-American, and I think just against what a lot of parents want for their own kids.
Absolutely. So let's give some info just so that our viewers understand what you're talking about. What is the College Board?
So the College Board is the most powerful organization in American education. It's been around for 126 years. So this began in 1899. It was a bunch of Ivy Leagues that came together with some elite New England boarding schools. And they wanted to systematize and create a unified standard for college entrance into Harvard and Yale and Princeton at the turn of the 20th century. And so this is the organization that then launched the SAT in 1926. And for the first couple decades, nobody really heard of it. It wasn't a big deal. In 1945, end of World War II, GI Bill, suddenly we have a ton of young people wanting to go to college, not enough seats. And the SAT is the readily available sorting mechanism for these GIs. And quickly colleges become highly selective, and the SAT is the way they're identifying the strongest applicants. So it becomes a household name and one of the biggest players in education at that point. Today, 125 years later, the College Board really does control American education. They control the advanced placement test, advanced placement curriculum, the SAT, the PSAT, the AccuPlacer, and really this is a far left fringe organization. It's head up by David Coleman. His mom was Bennington, the president of Bennington University his entire childhood, which is one of the most left-wing colleges in the United States. And we have seen how they push this ideology in AP World, AP US History, AP Literature, all of this. And so we're here to break the stranglehold of the College Board and the ACT as well.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad you spotted that. And that is really, really important. I think a lot of times Texans and Americans think that when you're getting the curriculum in the classrooms, that it's selected by your local elected trustees, but that's not true. It is dictated by so far up. And you talk about these Ivy Leagues that have gone so far left. They have just fallen off the spectrum in their radical nonsense. And we watched that play out at the congressional level, right, recently. But let's get into some specifics, because you and I hear this all the time, where parents are saying they're pushing transgender ideology. They're pushing straight up Marxism. They're pushing the pro-Islamist movements like for Hamas or ISIS or all of these terrorists. I mean, we watch these campus protests, these riots. These are kids that we've sent into our public schools, many of whom have been identified as being highly intelligent by the SAT. And the problem is that the courses that they're taking, those AP advanced placement courses that parents think, oh, we'll knock this out in high school, save some money on college. Talk about what they're actually being taught in those courses.
Yeah, it's really bad. And it's the kind of thing where you talk about it and people are like, are you a conspiracy theorist? No, not at all. This is all public. Anybody can see this. So 6 years ago now, the National Association of Scholars, headed up by Peter Wood, major academic, former Hillsdale professor, they released a document researching the College Board and the influence of the Confucius Institutes just on AP World History. And essentially what we found was that China, the Chinese Communist Party, was the biggest player in shaping AP world history. Well, how are they going to portray communism? How are they going to portray the history, the people's revolution and all of this, right? The Cultural Revolution. I mean, it is wild. And the Daily Wire picked this up. The Daily News picked this up, and some other big outlets as well. One specific example, I'm a Catholic. I've got 6 kids. There was about 3 or 4 years ago, a student was taking her AP Human Geography practice test online, and she looked at the question and she thought, that doesn't look right. And she took a picture of it and she posted it on Instagram and on Twitter, and it blew up and it set the internet on fire. So what was the question? And it said this. It said, given the 2 tables below, which country has made the most advances in female empowerment? Now, the 2 tables that they were given was just birth rates and death rates. That's it. And they had to say, which country has made the most advances in female empowerment? Well, the answer was France, because France had the lowest birth rate, and that was female empowerment. So they want to think that we're testing the student on their ability to read a table, but what they're actually testing is ideological conformity into an anti-Christian, anti-natalist, anti-woman view, I think, of the family.
That is so gross and makes my stomach turn, because we talk about this all the time. And this is part of that radical secular Marxist movement that really, I mean, we can go all the way back to the 1800s with Marx. But when we look at Herbert Marcuse and that long march through the institution, he weaponized women. The feminist movement was the weaponization of women, and they lied to women, telling them that you can be a boss babe and don't have babies, when I, as a mother, know that the most fulfilling thing, and I get to do a lot of cool things in my job, but the most fulfilling, the most wonderful, gratifying thing in my entire life is being a mother. And that is something that we can see with our declining birth rates, that propaganda telling women not to have children, telling women to murder their children in the womb. And I think that's really important. And actually, I've got chill bumps, because that is just so disgusting. But just one example of this leftist propaganda that is being pushed into our children's classrooms.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and Mandy, here's another example. I mean, you go to look at AP Lit, right? Objectively, Christians, Catholics, it's the best literary tradition the world has ever known. Going back to St. Augustine, the Confessions, City of God, Dante, Boethius, Flannery O'Connor, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, all of it. AP Lit. The only Catholic Christian thinker who gets a little bit is Shakespeare. It's global perspectives, right? It's global perspective. It's
they're trying to take him out.
Yeah.
By the way, right now in Texas, there are districts that are saying we need to remove Shakespeare.
Yep. Yeah.
It's gross.
100%. And so they're getting, students are getting this, and this is happening even at non-public Christian schools, Catholic schools as well. And so we're trying to make people aware that this is actually the organization shaping American education, and we need to break their stranglehold.
This is happening. I want to dig into that just a little bit more so that everyone makes this connection. Is they have, it's bait. Effectively, it's bait to try and hook your kids is what they're doing. So they're baiting them with this idea. You take these advanced placement courses, it'll bump up your GPA.
Yeah.
You will get through some courses that you won't have to take in college. So they spin it as you're going to save money. This is going to be good for you. You save money. You're advanced. You're at the top. You're elite. But what it actually is it's just corrupted, rotten bait to hook our kids into this far leftist Marxist ideology.
100%.
Okay. And they're doing it, like you said, it's in all of our public schools. I mean, I see it all the time. And some parents are recognizing what's happening, but the lure, because all our property taxes, we have $234 billion of ISD debt alone. So people are going, well, how can I save money? How can I reduce the debt that my kid has to take out? Because, of course, we know college costs have just exploded ridiculously. But then, so they're hooking, they're providing this rotten bait to hook kids. Yep. And then we look around society and go, oh, that's why kids on college campuses are, one day they're holding a trans pride flag,
100%.
like goofballs, and the next day they're holding the pro-Hamas flag. Yeah. And you're going, hold on a second, you're like shape-shifting in front of my face. But this is why.
That's right.
This is why. Is their minds are being poisoned in our classrooms, and it's all coming from this entity that's promising to save you money and make your kids advanced, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, coming from the College Board, 100%. And I'll tell you this story. This was 11,
which is AP courses, and SAT.
SAT, PSAT. So this was 11 years ago. I had just transitioned from a public school in Maryland. I call it the People's Republic of Maryland, where we're from.
I call this the People's Republic of Austin.
And I had just transitioned into a Catholic school, great school, but I was really shocked by the influence of the College Board at this school. And the first way I saw it was this: we had this lovely Dominican sister, we call them the Dancing Dominicans there, and she was introducing a new course, one an elective in philosophy and one in Christian apologetics. Okay. She was so excited. I was excited. The whole administration was excited. Hardly any students signed up. And when we were talking to the students, like, why didn't you want to take philosophy? These are the greatest questions. What's a good life? What is happiness? How do you find it? Their main answer was, it's Mr. Tate, it's not any AP points. It wasn't AP points. They would not take it because it wasn't AP points, right? And that was the moment we said, something's got to be done about this. We have got to create an alternative to the College Board that, instead of censoring the Western Christian intellectual tradition, is instead drawing heavily from it.
So this was born out of that crisis, effectively, where you have great kids, well-educated, coming from patriotic, God-loving families, and they don't want to take the courses that would prepare them to launch and be full, flourishing human beings. Yeah. Because it's not on the AP exam.
It's exactly right.
So you saw this and you thought, we've got to change something. And that launched CLT.
That's right.
So tell the story.
Yeah. So this was 2015, kind of had this idea. Yeah. My wife actually says I started screaming in the shower because it hit me like lightning. I was like, if you just change this one seemingly random thing, the college entrance exam. Right. That you can kind of reorient, if you can create a new gold standard. And I had seen around this time the original Harvard entrance exam, which was static for most of the 19th century. Students are basically just translating passages of Greek and Latin to get in. But what that meant is, if you wanted to go to Harvard, you had to have an absolute command of Greek and Latin. And so it shaped the education up to Harvard. Yeah. And then I was running an SAT, ACT prep company, and I was seeing what they were putting on the SAT, but mostly what they were also leaving out. Right? Okay. And you're reading this meaningless stuff. And I'm not saying all global perspectives meaningless. I'm not saying that, but they were censoring the Western Christian tradition clearly, you know? And in fact, the first year we launched CLT, we hired 2 interns from Princeton. We said, your job this summer is to get your hands on as many SATs as you can and find out all of the source material. And they got 12 full-length SATs that had been administered in the past few years, a grand total of 0 authors that are coming from a Christian perspective. 0. So very intentional of wanting to erase.
Can I just stop you? Yeah. Which would mean, when we're talking about the significance of that, when you talk about 0 Christian authors, the entire setup of Western civilization 100%. Was based on Christianity. Yeah. What came out of, the Old and New Testament, that Judeo-Christian values. That is what set the stage for our governing structures, our standards of morality, our operation of our entire civilization, and Western civilization, but also American civilization. Yeah. That's why that's so significant, is Mandy, our kids don't know it.
I think you're saying it exactly right. Mark Bauerlein, who you may know, a dear friend at First Things, I mean, he says the actual mission of the College Board is the erasure of the Christian intellectual tradition from American education and culture.
Yes, it is.
That's the actual goal. Yeah. And they're the biggest player in the country right now.
Shaping our entire system.
Exactly.
Right. And so this is, we see this everywhere. I want our great viewers, Texans and Americans alike, to understand this is at the very highest levels. Yeah. And they are baiting you with money and the claim of prestige. But what they are doing is they are subverting not just Western values, American exceptionalism. They are subverting you as a Christian parent that has spent your entire life fulfilling God's mission that he's given you, which is is to raise your children up in the way that they should go, which is to know Christ as our Savior, to know what life should look like, not to be a widget moving computer things behind a computer screen. And I know we can get into that, the advances that they're shoving down into our classrooms when it comes to technology. But we really need to make sure, if we are going to protect and perpetuate the freedoms of the West, not just the freedoms, but the rights, women's rights, then we have got to have an understanding of what built it in the first place.
100%. Yeah. And it's already cracking. It's already cracking. And some of the best schools in the country, schools like Regents of Austin right here, schools like the Veritas School in Richmond, no AP. And they don't do AP for because they know it's an ideological dumpster fire and they're not going to get near it. But you know what? All of the prep schools, except one that formed the College Board back in 1900, all of them except one have now left. They've all gotten rid of AP too, because they know it's not serious academically. I was on campus at an Ivy League university a couple weeks ago, and in a room with the provost, the VP of enrollment, director of admissions. They all know it's a joke. They all know it's a joke.
Right. But the propaganda to parents, this massive marketing cartel that said, you have to do this, mom and dad, you have to do this. And then mom and dad are saying, hey, school, if you're not offering AP, then, and a lot of classical schools face this. I'm actually a parent of a classical charter school students. And I hear this all the time. And it's this push because they have bought in. And I understand why. It is very alluring to think, oh, I can get my kid jump started on college. But that's the game, right?
Totally.
That's the game. And that is...
And meanwhile, the colleges are like, we don't care. They don't think it's serious. And in fact, we're launching right now our alternative to AP and IB, International Baccalaureate, which is also
full of
globalist wasteland. Classical Baccalaureate. But what we've discovered in this is that the colleges do not take AP because it's serious. The ones that accept it still, they only accept it because if they don't, they're going to lose enrollment to colleges that still do.
Right. That's right. And that's kind of the trickle down it, right? They accept it because they're going to lose enrollment. Schools do it because parents demand it. Parents demand it because they think their kid is going to get, by the way, it's not one-to-one credit. I think that's really important, right? They're not seeing it. You take a U.S. AP history course, you're not getting the one-to-one credit. It's a fraction because they know it's a joke. And you're not saving that much money, but it sounds like you're saving it because you're inflating grades. Right? And I've seen you post and talk about this before, inflating grades all throughout our education system. And so it's effectively the inflation, the propaganda has created this race to the bottom with our kids.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Mandy, because we're at TPPF, I love if I could to share with you a story about the founding of CLT and Kevin Roberts, who was heavily involved in this in the early phase. So early day, and this is, CLT is just an idea. There's no website, there's no money, there's no nothing. I'm just calling anyone who will have a conversation with me about the idea. And I leave a voicemail for the president of Wyoming Catholic College. And to my surprise, was one of the first people to call back and one of the first people to validate this idea. He said, I've been dreaming about this for years. And I thought this was this very original idea. So I'm like, it's not that original. People have been thinking about challenging the College Board. But this was Dr. Kevin Roberts. And over the next several months, CLT, places like the University of Dallas, Christendom, Hillsdale, it started to take off. And I started to get, this is getting crazy. We need to, I was a former college counselor, ran an SAT company. I was like, we need to get a serious person in here to run this operation. So we tried to get Kevin, but at the same time, Texas public policy was going after him. And we ended up losing. But Kevin said, I'm going to stay a dear friend to CLT. And he has, for sure. And Kevin has played a role with a lot of the things that have happened, including adoption recently at the U.S. Naval Academy, West Point. Pete Heggs has said CLT is the new gold standard for college entrance. So sitting in this room, very indebted to Kevin Roberts, if you're listening, Kevin.
Oh, well, that is wonderful. We love Kevin Roberts as well. He's now running the amazing Heritage Foundation, which I actually hail from many moons ago. So it all does come full circle. That is awesome. Giving a shout out to Dr. Roberts. You saw something early on. So that is so fantastic. I love to hear that story about Pete Hegseth. I think more and more leaders recognize that you are a part of the solution. And I say this all the time. I say this about school choice. I say this about we're taking on the radical leftists at the AFT, the American Library Association, the Council of American Islamic Relations, all of these just really evil, that red-green alliance that is working together. There is no silver bullet to save the republic.
Yep.
But CLT is certainly a part of the solution that can help course
thank
correct
you.
our
And
system.
I feel like if there is a silver bullet, it is classical education, the recovery of this educational tradition that shaped 100% of America's founders. Tell you if I could, this quick story about Pete Hegseth. So he wrote, of course, the national bestseller, The Battle for the American Mind, with David Goodwin on classical education, the history of American education, and how the crazy Marxists got a hold of it 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in The Battle for the American Mind, he recommended any serious college replace the SAT with the CLT right away. I'm like, cool, that's great. Well, about a year and a half ago, people start just blowing up my cell phone that Pete Hegseth just got tapped as SecDef. And I'm like, cool, great, that's awesome. And they're like, no, he unilaterally controls admission standards to the academy. And so we had already been told by folks that were there. I've got dear friends at the Naval Academy because CLT is based in Annapolis. And they were saying, look, we love you, we love CLT, but the Naval Academy is going to be the last place to adopt because there's a sea of bureaucracy. Nobody can navigate it. And unless this comes from the very top, there's no way it's going to happen. And we watch as even, bureaucrats at the Pentagon and others try to put the brakes on this. Mm-hmm. And Pete Hegseth just kind of bowled it down and said, no, this is what we're doing. We're doing it right now. It was amazing.
Love it. That is amazing. Congrats on that. That's huge. So this is being accepted at the universities that train the next great leaders to defend not just America, but the entire free world.
That's right.
That is huge. So that is such an important bit of information for Texans to understand because as I have littles right now, but I want to make sure that they are also taking the CLT exam because we're not doing AP courses. We're not doing the PSATs. We're not training them in planting seeds of this Marxist radical ideology that has taken hold of too many young people. And I don't know many parents across our great state that would support that if they knew the information that you're telling.
That's right.
So let's talk about what's happening here in Texas because what we want is for CLT to be recognized as a test right there with the SAT, right there with the ACT. There's no reason that there should be a duopoly or a monopoly system, and there's no reason that our kids should be exposed to the radical Marxist ideology that they're getting now. So tell me where we are in Texas and what we really want to see happen for the parents and the patriots across our state.
That's right. Yeah. So last year had a big win in the legislative session, getting SAT and ACT kind of written out in terms of the duopolistic position is the only game in town. And so
they
this year...
got themselves written into the law to confirm.
That's
they
right.
were written into the law.
Yes. Yeah.
As by name, so they used lobbyists and I talk about this all the time. All the lobbyists that are in there just scurrying around, working for profiteers, working for conglomerates that do not care about Texans, do not care about freedoms, do not care about our values. So they got themselves literally written into the law, saying what? What did the original law say?
Yeah, so for college entrance exams, and I believe even this top 10% concept that is in Texas was tied only to the SAT and ACT.
Okay.
So last session we got them written out. This session, Senate Bill 1241, the goal is to get a Governor Abbott commission, the Higher Ed Commission, I believe, will then be the body to have control over the college entrance exams that Texas will be using.
So the Higher Education Coordinating Board gets to decide. So the great leaders under and Governor Abbott signed it into law saying, so yay. I mean, he's a fantastic leader and has done incredible things to reform our education system. So I'm so encouraged to hear that. So basically they said, okay, we're not going to name names at this point. We're going to leave it open to whatever the Higher Education Coordinating Board is saying.
That's right.
So now lots of amazing people on the Higher Education Coordinating Boards, and they have the authority to recognize whatever college entrance exams are out there and proved credible and doing exactly what we're saying.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the goal. Yeah. And we're seeing this. I mean, the College Board lobbying machine is having less and less success with Republican legislatures right now. They're just not buying it. I mean, they tried very hard in Indiana. I think we won 69-27 right down party lines. There was one Democrat that actually voted for CLT in Indiana.
Nice.
Purdue, Indiana University. And it wasn't a lack of effort on the part of the College Board or ACT, but they're just not buying the arguments anymore. Yeah. And I think when any parent thinks about the College Board for a second, I mean, if your kid took AP US, how'd their view of the country change? Did they love America more after? No.
Right.
they get this idea that we're just the big bad bully. That's the takeaway from AP US.
It's globalist mentality, right? That
Yes,
we're just
100%.
one of many. Not that we are the greatest, most benevolent, most successful, most powerful,
Yes. AP
most
undoes
important
that.
nation in the world.
Yes, AP undoes that.
They undo
belief
that.
in American exceptionalism.
Mom and Dad, AP is undoing the belief in American exceptionalism.
100%.
You need to understand this is what's happening to your children, is they are being effectively this starting point of being radicalized to think that America is not great, to not recognize our history. That is so important for parents to understand.
Radicalized under the guise of academic rigor.
Right. Academic rigor and inclusivity. Because I'm hearing this a lot right now. We're in these battles when we're working at the State Board of Education level to make sure that our history and social studies teachers are high quality and they're telling the true, real story of American greatness and our position in the world and why the Judeo-Christian values is what ended slavery, why we set up 3 branches of government, why George Washington didn't decide to become a king just like had existed throughout the entire world. All of these things are so important, but they're not learning that with AP exams. They're learning that, we just heard recently someone very famous say that we should just share power with China and do things like that. No, we should not. We are the greatest, and we need to stay that way to protect the free world.
That's right. Yeah, and Texas is doing great work. This new reading list, it looks like something coming out of one of these great classical schools.
It is. We are so excited, and this is coming up, and it is the same radicals that have the same lobbyists at the SBOE that are partnering that Red Green Alliance. You've got the American Federation for Children whack jobs, the NEA nutcases, partnering with the Islamists at CARE and other far leftist organizations. And they're all, of course, fighting against our great literature list that we here at the foundation and so many other dozens of other organizations, thousands of Texans, millions of Americans are seeing this and going, this is what every single kid across our country should be reading.
I got to tell you, Mandy, I was so personally encouraged because I didn't know that could happen at the public school state district level. Yeah. And Texas said, yes, it can.
Yeah. We've got our Chairman Aaron Kinsey he is a warrior. He is a veteran. And he is like, we are going to take back America. We believe here in Texas, as goes Texas, so goes America. And so we are going to make sure that our kids have great literature based in the classics. No more of this low quality garbage, these graphic novels, these inappropriate.
Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing?
That's right. That's exactly right. So I'm very encouraged by that as well. And it is part of the whole picture. That's why I say I don't think there is a silver bullet. I think that CLT is a huge part of it and taking the power away from the College Board that is setting all of these standards. But we have to do so many things to take back our nation, to protect it and perpetuate our freedoms and to protect the free world. That is a reality. We had to step in World War I and save the world. We had to step in World War II and save the world. We are here. We are in a culture war, a world culture war, and it is time for Americans, for Texans to lead the way and Americans to step up and say we're taking back and we're teaching our kids our value and our heritage is great and here's why.
That's right. I love the passion. That's right. And it's happening. It's young parents right now. Yeah. That are done with the nonsense. Yep. Yeah, and standing up.
So here in Texas, I'm going to be here supporting you and encouraging you on, making sure that every parent, this is what this is, the parent empowerment movement. We want to empower parents with knowledge. We want to make sure that they understand why it is so important to have an alternative, a non-Marxist alternative that's not trying to tell your daughters that being a mother isn't the most wonderful, fulfilling thing, that to tell your sons that America is not worth saving and fighting for, that tell our next generation of Texans and Americans that we are not worth it and we're one of many, because we're not. We are exceptional and we are exceptional for a reason. But why in Texas? So if the Higher Education Coordinating Board say, yes, we're going to recognize ACT, SAT, and CLT, then what happens? What's the next step? Just basically all of our schools can then be offering
That's
CLT?
Right. And I think what's likely to happen is what happened in Florida. All CLT needed was an equal playing field. Yep. And ACT's top person left ACT because he's a homeschooling dad, Wes Gentry. And he says, I actually believe in the mission of CLT. I believe in this kind of education. Yeah. And so students, schools, whole districts have flocked to CLT over ACT and College Board. I mean, CLT is going to be number one in Texas in the next couple of years. And so all we need is equal footing on the legislative level.
Yep.
And because the College Board, it's not just bad content and a terrible vision for education. It's bad technology, horrible customer service. I mean, you call the College Board and you feel like they hate you. You're like, what did I do to you? You know? And so we also want to beat them on that as well, because you can't disconnect this kind of education with the way that it's passed on.
Right.
So I say a lot, we want to be like a Chick-fil-A of standardized testing.
Oh, I love that.
Not just good stuff in the box, but like the way that you get it. Yeah. Right. My pleasure.
I love that. That's awesome. The Chick-fil-A of testing. And you said you're coming out with curriculum soon.
That's the dream. Yeah, and launching classical baccalaureate as well. So we've got a number of schools. In fact, schools like Great Hearts Irving, the University of Dallas, heavily involved in our first pilot this year. But we're starting off with alternatives to AP US, AP World, AP Lit, and AP Lang. We can't keep up with the demand from schools right now to just be a part of the pilot for this. I mean, that's how excited schools are to get out of the College Board ecosystem.
Right. I love to hear that. You know, we did research a couple of years ago and we found that here in the state of Texas, this was prior to passing the Education Freedom Accounts. So it came out, but it showed that new schools, particularly charter school growth, was 7-fold for classical education. Yep. And it has just exploded since then. I cannot sing the praises of a classical education enough. I believe at least 90% of kids should be in a classical education. This is how we develop deep thinkers. And this is really something that's important now, especially more and more data is coming out showing the harms of technology. We're going to be working to get technology out of classrooms for our young kids.
Yes.
But the classical education is where it's at. You're really helping the brain form and you're planting the seeds of a well-formed
This is what I think is so cool about this crazy, huge classical wave we're seeing right now is that we had a long period of time where the right was simply trying to like take out the worst toxins from a whole scheme that was basically just secular progressive education. And classical has given conservatives a positive vision for an education that is anchored in tradition and timeless stories. And the cool thing about it is it has an incredible appeal across the aisle. Any decent parent wants their kid to go to school and come back more honest, or to learn great stories, to grow in their sense of wonder. And so more and more, I think people, left of center are looking at these classical schools saying, I want that for my kid. I don't care if they're goofy Republicans or whatever they think. It really does have a universal appeal to because it's an education that is a deep dive into what it means to be fully human. And it's such an exciting time, I think.
It is. I totally agree. And the more parents that know about it and the more opportunities to pursue it. This is why. So I mentioned that study that we did that showed that classical charter schools were growing 7-fold. And you mentioned great ones, Great Hearts. And so this is just key. We now have education freedom accounts. We're now seeing more and more growth here. We're approaching here. In fact, by the time that this airs, we will be over 250,000 parents said, I want freedom in the first year launch, largest launch, even by percentage in the entire country's history. So that is encouraging, but it's encouraging because more and more families are seeking out and they have the opportunity to find a great classical education, which means they don't want that garbage making its way into their kids' classrooms.
Yeah. And I love to draw the connection here between the school choice movement, educational choice, parental choice, and what we're doing, and Corey DeAngelis, who's one of the leaders, of the school choice movement, he's pointed this out, is that if schools are still beholden to the College Board, school choice can't do that much, at the end of the day, because you're still beholden to the same measuring stick for what's going to define academic success. Yeah. And so school choice needs an ally, I think, in testing choice, and that's what we're hoping to provide.
Absolutely. I love that. An ally in testing choice. And that's exactly what it is. And that's what parents are demanding. So I can see this now. Again, we're at 250,000. This is the first year.
Huge.
It is massive. I think that we'll have hundreds of thousands of parents very quickly demanding to have access to a classical testing that meets with the education that they're expecting, so their kids do not have to go down the garbage lane of secular Marxists that are being pushed by the College Board and other entities entities in the curriculum space. So that is very exciting. So just to kind of cap everything off, to make sure that I understand, as we're thinking about going into the 90th legislative session, which will be here before we know it. So the college higher education board will have to say, yes, we will recognize CLT. And you mentioned several states that have done this. Can you reiterate again what states have already said yes to CLT?
Yeah, huge wins in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Indiana, very close to Ohio as well. North Carolina, Chapel Hill included very recently. And in addition to that, all of the service academies, West Point, Naval Academy, and Air Force, and CLT again endorsed there as the new gold standard. I think what anyone can see just at face value. I mean, let's talk about the test itself for a second. The new SAT, anyone with two eyes can see it's not a serious test, right? The longest reading passages are 120 words, right? From all of the globalist perspectives, CLT reading passages are 550 to 700 words. They're reading John Locke. They're reading Benjamin Franklin, right? I think anyone with two eyes who's just going to be fair, they go, oh, wow, this is a real test. This is,
But it's been dumbed down, right? And this is important.
Yes.
I touched on this. Everything has systematically been dumbed down over the past multiple decades, right?
And it's been happening since the ACT launched in 1959. And so if you think about it, I mean, a lot of the way two companies usually compete in ways that benefit the consumer, which is they're competing by the quality and the price point. Yeah. College Board and ACT, they compete by making the test dumber because the dumber test is going to be the easier gateway to scholarships and admissions.
Right.
And so what that has ended up doing is lowering the academic standards over time. And we're trying to come in and essentially hit the reset button and kind of say enough is enough.
I love it. Okay. So higher education coordinating board has to say yes. I don't think that's going to be a hard lift at all. Great people on that board that should recognize how the absolute demand for this education. Okay. And then do you have to pass a law? Is there a legislative play as well? Or once the higher coordinating board, once they say, yes, we recognize CLT, is there anything else that actually has to be done?
It's been different in different states.
Okay.
And so when we had the legislation passed in Florida, it was still then the Board of Governors to get us on with the universities there as well, even though the scholarship component was handled at the state legislative level.
Okay.
So every state a bit different there. But I wanted to add this, Mandy, when we were just a few weeks ago on campus at an Ivy League, the problem CLT solved was the problem that the SAT and ACT were not differentiating at the top of the curve. Most of their applicants had over a 1,500, which is a 34 on the ACT. And so it wasn't helpful. They went test optional. It was a disaster during COVID. Mm-hmm. So all of the Ivies are going back.
Yeah.
And then the SAT and ACT simply are not providing the service they promise, and that all of their applicants are at the very, very, very top, and it doesn't meaningfully differentiate among them. And that's what we're hoping by introducing a new and rigorous academic standard. It can help solve that problem as well for highly selective places like the University of Texas.
That's amazing. Well, we want to see that because we believe here in Texas we have the best and the brightest, but we need to be able to prove it. We need to be able to make sure that we are also ensuring that these kids receive the scholarships and the recognition that they deserve for being in rigorous courses, for going to really difficult schools and taking and studying the important but hard stuff to comprehend. Yeah. That is huge for kids. And quite frankly, I see this as a national security issue. This is vital. Not only that we get the garbage out that's coming in through the College Board, that's coming in from these Marxist and Islamist entities, the Red Green Alliance that have locked together to push junk into our classrooms. But if we cannot teach the next generation to know America, they can't love America and they won't fight to defend America.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
This is a national security issue. Well, I'm so grateful that you are here and talking to the parent empowerment movement, talking to all of the leaders in the education space to understand why this is so important. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to look in that camera right now. Yes. Talk to the Higher Education Coordinating Board. Talk to our great leaders and let them understand and know what you're here to offer our state and how we can continue to lead the nation.
Yeah, Mandy, thanks for the opportunity. The College Board, ACT, these are not friends to the state of Texas. This is a state with conservative values, with traditions that shares in the great Western and even Christian vision of what it means to be a person, the vision for the family. And the College Board and the ACT have been on the wrong side of that great Texas vision. And so we are asking, we're hopeful that you can make this move of looking at the test itself. Look at what the CLT is putting in front of students. Look at what the College Board is putting in front of students. Look what the ACT is putting in front of students, and ask the question, which of these best reflects the values we hold so dear in the great state of Texas?
Jeremy, thank you for
Mandy.
having this spark
it's been a lot
in
of fun.
the shower.
I love the energy and the excitement. Like, I'm so not in New England right now. Like, we can say things like Marxist, and it's wonderful.
Yes.
I love it.
Oh, yes.
I'm having so much fun.
We call those Marxists out, and we want them gone. I want them in no part of our education system. So thank you so much for coming to Texas.
Keep fighting the good fight down here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for what you're doing to provide education for students across America. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. And now you have the power.